Okay, here we go. This is the show. This is it. I'm going to try to speak quietly today because I'm in this hotel room and it's very echoey in here. From a makeshift recording studio in an echoey hotel room in Moab, Utah. It's People Pleaser. We're back for another episode. Hello. Hi. We've got people over here watching on TikTok over here. We got some people watching on YouTube over here. We got people listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you happen to be listening to the show or watching the show. Hello to you. Welcome back. How are you? How are you doing? How is your life going? I hope it's going very well. I hope you got people to talk to. If it's not, I hope you can pop in and you have someone you can call, someone you can text if you're feeling a little squirrely. You know, sometimes you want to talk to a professional, sometimes you want to talk to that therapist, you want to get that pedigree, that academic acumen in the room. You want someone who really has that clinical analysis that they can put on it. But sometimes you want more of just like a human to human spin, you know? Sometimes you don't need someone to necessarily diagnose what you're going through for you or try to come up with a plan of action. Sometimes you just want to talk to another person who's been through it. You know, sometimes I talk to my sponsor when I'm going through things, and he's really clear with me, and he tells me exactly what I need to do and exactly where my bullshit is, and he tells me where I'm lying to myself and where I'm lying to other people, and he doesn't sugarcoat things. But sometimes I just want to talk to another alcoholic who's not my sponsor and kind of go like, have you ever experienced this? Sometimes I want to talk to another alcoholic and be like, does your sponsor ever annoy you? And they're like, yeah, my sponsor annoys me all the time because he won't just like be my buddy. He's always like calling me on my bullshit and I need him to be my buddy, but that's not who my sponsor is. Sometimes I just need that peer-to-peer support. I found a place that you can do that. Okay. This whole rant has a point. There's a new app called White Flag that you can check out. And coolly enough, White Flag is sponsoring this episode. How about that? It's a real podcast. It's a real show. You thought I was just talking, right? How many of you were in the comments and you were like, I know what you're talking about. I feel you. I feel you. And then you found out it was an ad and now you feel betrayed. I want you to know, don't feel betrayed because everything I just said is still true. All right. I like White Flag. This is a peer-to-peer 24/7 free support app. This is people helping people. There are no bots. All right. There's no scripts. It's not a therapy app. It's literally people who have been in the same situation that you're in talking to you. Okay. You can talk with people who have been in the same situation as you. It's an app that you can go get right now. It's called White Flag, all one word. You have to be 18 plus to get the app. All right. It's currently only in the US, but it's expanding soon. So, go check that out. Thank you, White Flag, for sponsoring this episode. Are you bummed out that I mentioned that and that you thought that we were having an organic conversation and you found out it was an ad? You shouldn't be. I believe what I just said. Go check out White Flag if you want to talk to someone who maybe has had the same experience that you've had, who maybe is going through something that they've gone through something that's a similar situation to what you're going through. Check that out. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about what we want to talk about on the show here today. Somebody just said, Kathy just said in the chat on TikTok, I just celebrated a year sobriety. It's happened before though, so I downplay it a lot. Kathy, welcome back. And congratulations on another year of sobriety. It's always really, really cool to hear from people who had time, who had a year, who had 2 years, who had 3 years, who make it back and get that time again. Sometimes I really think that that's cooler than what I'm doing. I'm terrified of a relapse because I don't think I would make it back. The fact that you made it back is baller. The fact that you made it back is really, really cool that you survived that time out of the program or out of whatever you were doing to stay sober and you made it back. Congratulations, Kathy, on a year sober. Yeah, I want to talk about something on the show today. Big old topic. Lots of stuff to cover. So let's get into it. The title of the show is A Crash Course in Far Left Extremism. And I really do need to say up at the top of the show here that this is going to be the crashest of courses. This is going to be an extremely crashy course because I'm not an authority on anything that I'm talking about. I'm not like I don't have a PhD in any of this stuff, and I'm not writing any academic journals on this stuff. I'm just doing podcasts where I'm shooting from the hip and giving you my armchair analysis. Okay. I don't think anyone would cite me in any serious academic discussion of these topics. So, and also because this is a much more complicated and nuanced topic than I could ever hope to cover in a single podcast episode. I'd have to do an entire series of episodes to actually in detail cover the nuances of all of this stuff. So I want to make it really clear at the top of the show that this is hopefully a decent place for beginners and for people to begin if people have questions or are curious about this topic. But it's definitely not the only place that you should look to. Maybe it's the first or an interesting place to start, because we're just going to sort of be doing a very surface level analysis of a lot of these very complex ideas. So keep that in mind while you're talking amongst yourselves and each other in the chat, and keep that in mind while you're listening. But this idea that people throw out there that there are extremes on both sides of the political spectrum and that the extremes are just as bad as each other. This is horseshoe theory, the idea that if you go to the extremes of both sides of a spectrum, you essentially have the same thing. Both sides of a horseshoe are the same thing. They both serve the same function. Just because one is on one side and one is on the other doesn't make them fundamentally different from each other. And a lot of people think that the existence of a far left, just the fact that there is a far left or an extreme left, that the existence of extreme left ideology means that that extreme left ideology is equal to the harm that extreme right ideology is capable of, or that these ideas are equally untenable, equally radical, equally extreme, that they're essentially the same thing, two sides of a coin. And so I want to sort of talk about that. I think that extreme right ideology gets a lot of radio play, especially in leftist spaces. I do a lot on this show. On this show, I cover the ins and outs of extreme right ideology a lot. And I sort of want, in the interest of trying to be fair and balanced, to take a look at extreme left ideology and see what it actually is. See what is extreme about it, what is radical about it, what's scary about it, and what it all actually entails, and why it might be, hard to fight for. I want to acknowledge something that's very true. So first at the top, I'm going to look at the left and right and the extremes of both of these and see how they're the same and how they differ. A couple key ways that they're the same, and this is in the abstract. This is just really general, okay? Is in the abstract, you need people to believe as you believe to have a shot at achieving these goals. So in the abstract, the extreme left needs a majority of people in society to believe as they believe to achieve a lot of their goals. It's going to take convincing a lot of people to actually get any kind of serious political weight behind these ideas. And it's the same for the right. You need people you need enough people in power, people with money, people with influence to agree with you and to believe as you believe to have any shot at building the world the way that you see fit. So that's very abstract ideas. Both things are requiring some conversion, getting people on your team, convincing people that your ideas are better than the other person's. Another thing is that both ideas, and this is one of these big words that sounds really scary, is both things involve the eradication of something or many somethings to achieve their goals. Things need to be eradicated. Societal systems need to be eradicated. Again, this is very abstract, very generalized, because if you get specific at all, the differences are that the extreme left wants to eradicate systems and the right wants to eradicate people. So I also want to say at the top of the show that it is my personal contention that there is no good faith equivocation that can be made between the extreme left and the extreme right. I do not believe that they are equal, or that they are capable of doing the same amount of harm, or that they are just as nefarious as each other. In fact, I think in principle, the underlying motives that inform the extreme left are humanistic and realistic and logical, and the underlying beliefs and motives that inform the extreme right are dogmatic and theistic and not really rooted in objective reality. They're mostly based on personal beliefs, religious beliefs, and things that don't really align with scientific data, but just sort of a personal dogmatic view of the world. And yeah, so what that results in is one side saying this system is unsustainable. This system, the data is showing us that this system is not working, that this system is going to lead to a bad result. We need to rework this system. And on the other side, you have people saying my personal religion that cannot be verified with data or empirical, studies that goes counter to science. My personal religion says that this kind of person is bad, and I want to make a world where that kind of person doesn't exist anymore. So it gets really genocidal, really homicidal, really quick when you go to the extremes of it. The other big differences between the right and the left extremes are right and left extremism, and this is really scary, is that the level of representation that these views have. Far left extremism does not have any mainstream political representation. It just doesn't exist. There is no mainstream accepted politicians out there who are far left extremists. There is no far left extremist party in the United States that has found mainstream success. That doesn't exist. Whereas the extreme right does have mainstream representation. Pretty much the entire mainstream representation for the right in America is extreme and is pushing for extremist ideas, like trying to create a Christo-fascist white nationalist state that eliminates people who don't fall into a very narrow window of like, you need to be this kind of person and you need to fall in line with this kind of ideology, or we want you gone. We want to eradicate you. It doesn't end with trans people and gay people. That's the big culture war thing right now, but it doesn't end with that. Like, this ideology wants conformity. When I'm talking about far right ideology, it wants uniformity. It's very pro eugenics. It's very pro ethnic cleansing. It's looking for a homogeneity in the species that is unlike what the left wants. The left, I think this is sort of, so I said in the abstract, both ideologies need to convince people and get converts and need people to believe as they believe. But the difference in that too, right there, is like the extreme right wants to convert people to Christianity. And even inside of that framework, there's all these different Christians that are arguing over whose version of Christianity is going to win out once they convert all the sinners. It's so funny. I did a few videos this last week on Christianity, and there were a deluge of Christians in my comments telling me that I'm ignorant to what Christians believe and that I don't actually know what Christians believe. And what's funny is all of those Christian commenters, hundreds of them, were saying that the other Christian commenters weren't real Christians. So they were all telling me that I'm not aware of what real Christianity is and what real Christians believe, but they were also saying that all of the other Christians in the comments who were saying that weren't real Christians, because other Christians in the comments would say, that's not what we believe. We believe this, this, or this. And then another Christian would be like, don't listen to this person. This person's not a real Christian. I'm a real Christian, and you're wrong, and this person's wrong too. So all these Christians who are telling me that I don't know what Christianity actually is and what Christians actually believe were also saying that all of the other Christians in the comments don't know what Christianity is. So that was really funny. None of them could seem to agree with each other. So you have this far-right ideology that wants to convert people to this very specific religion. But even inside of that religion, there's all these different sects of that religion and all these different interpretations of the Bible. And they can't agree on who's got the best one. Everyone's certain that it's theirs. Of course. Of course. It would be weird if they weren't. It would be weird to be part of a church and be like, I think my church is like mostly right. There are some other churches that are more right than mine, but I like mine. Like mine's like got enough right things. Mine's definitely got a bunch of stuff wrong, but it's got enough right things. Everyone's like, no. My pastor, the way that he interprets the Bible for me, that's the one. The place that I went to Bible school, we figured it out. My biblical analysis is actually the correct one. All these other people got it wrong. But yeah, far right wants, when we talk about getting converts, getting people to believe as you believe, the far right wants to convert people to a very specific religious ideology. The left, when it comes to getting converts and convincing people to believe as you believe, it's more about just like getting people to like agree with scientific consensus, getting people to agree that climate change is real, getting people to like agree that late stage capitalism is unsustainable and is doomed, getting people to like, see the forest for the trees on this stuff and just sort of like get on board with what we need to do to actually start mending society. Beyond that, I think that the left really still wants to leave room for ideological pluralism outside of systems, outside of the systems that society, that human civilization runs on. The left is okay, I think, with people having their own spiritual lives and their own spiritual health regimen. Whatever's making you feel healthiest, whatever you think is best for your well-being, and whatever makes you feel spiritually fulfilled and healthiest, I think the left in general and fundamentally in its core personality is okay with that, as long as you're not trying to enforce that on other people. Hey, this thing works for me. I think we should build society around this spiritual practice that works for me. I think the left wants to leave space for, you can still believe that if it works for you. You just need to leave everyone else alone. And you just need to like keep that to yourself, especially if it's not something that we can all agree on through empirical data and through the scientific process. If we cannot see how this is an empirical good for us, then you're going to need to keep that a private, personal thing. And that will come into play into how some of these far left extremist thoughts can be problematic later on. So put a pin in that and see if it comes up later. I might remember to remind you, I might not, but see if you hear it coming up later on. The idea that like the left is going to struggle with, when it comes to achieving the goals of far left extremism, they're going to come up against the problem of needing to convince people that you're right, but also leaving space for ideological pluralism and doing that dance. The right has no interest in ideological pluralism, so they don't need to worry about that problem. They're not looking for ideological pluralism. They're looking to eradicate ideological pluralism and get to a place of ideological homogeneity. It's much more difficult to try to get everyone on the same page, but also want to hold space for ideological diversity. So that's some of the problems that can be bumped up against when trying to push for some of this stuff. But let's get into it. Let's get into, and specifically, I decided to do this through the framework at looking at eradication. I talked about how that's one of the things that's similar. Both of these ideologies in this horseshoe dynamic require the eradication of things to accomplish their ends. The left wants to eradicate certain systems. The right wants to eradicate certain people. I would, of course, argue that eradicating systems is more moral, more good than trying to eradicate people. But let's look at some of these systems that the extreme left, far left, would like to eradicate, starting with the eradication of late stage capitalism. So the reason I'm starting with this one is like it sort of informs everything else that comes afterward. Like this system right here, if you can convince society that it is an absolute cancer that is unsustainable and that will kill us, it informs so many of the other things that the extreme left wants to kind of do battle with. What is late stage capitalism? Someone asked me this the other day. I was talking about late stage capitalism because I did a post about the debt ceiling deal President Biden made with Kevin McCarthy. And someone in the comments was like, so you're happy that late stage capitalism is going to continue for another 2 years? You're just celebrating that? I was like, oh, no. Like late stage capitalism is terrible. But late stage capitalism is going to continue for another 2 years, whether we reach this debt ceiling deal or not. Like late stage capitalism wasn't going to die in 2 years if they didn't reach this deal. I don't think realistically that late stage capitalism is going to come to an end anytime soon. I think that actually achieving the goal of trying to dismantle it and replace it with something else is, I'm not sure if it'll happen in my lifetime, to be honest. I would like to see it, but it's very, very complicated and very difficult. Because, like I said earlier, the far left does not have any mainstream political representation right now. If we were actually going to try to do it through the proper channels, do it civilly, do it democratically, do it diplomatically, we're a far way off from being able to do that because we don't actually have any representation for these ideas in politics. The only way that it could be done is through some sort of violent overthrow. And I'm not really confident in the veracity of violent revolutions. They don't have a historically great track record. It causes all kinds of problems when you try to overthrow or topple a government and replace it with the people who overthrew it and toppled it. It's like, okay, are you ready to institute whatever system you're going to institute to replace these leaders and this late stage capitalism? But I was talking about this with a friend, talking about how I had this conversation with this guy about late stage capitalism on my comments, and my friend was like, what is that? What does that mean? And I was like, well, again, this is one of those ideas and one of those concepts that you could do an entire podcast about. But the gist is, it's sort of like late stage cancer. It's just sort of the idea that any system like this that thrives on exponential growth, that's always trying to make itself bigger and double itself and get bigger and bigger and bigger, and is never satisfied with a bigger number and always needs more, and enough is not a thing. Enough doesn't exist. Any system like this is unsustainable and is slowly killing whatever living thing it's feeding off of, and will progressively get worse, like cancer. And so we're just in a late stage of capitalism, of a capitalistic society, where the people who profit the most have indulged in certain fascistic qualities that have made the system toxic and poisonous. And it's progressed to a state where something needs to be done because it is clearly in front of us not working anymore. Essentially, it's the result of when you have corporations that have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to boost profits every single quarter. Otherwise, they need to become, the company is no longer solvent. So that company always needs to be making more money. You have companies that naturally do increasingly more unethical things. And then you also have a problem in our society right now where those companies are posting those profits every quarter. They're continuing to make more money, but they're not sharing the money with the workforce or with the consumers. So the top earners, the highest earning shareholders and the top earners of the company are getting exponentially more wealthy, and that wealth is not being shared with the workforce or with the consumers. And so what is happening is, the way that companies get more wealthy, the way that corporations make more money, profit after profit, is the price of goods continues to go up. The price of healthcare continues to go up. The price of food continues to go up. The price of clothing continues to go up. The price of housing continues to go up. And that's obviously unsustainable if you don't continue to pay the workers in a commensurate way. Obviously, at some point, you're going to have a workforce full of people who can't afford basic necessities while working full time. While being completely burnt out on working full time, they can't afford basic necessities. And this is not this might happen in the future. This is where we are. This is where we have arrived currently with capitalism, which is why people say we are in a state of late stage capitalism, because the cancer has progressed to a point where it's terminal. And you cannot go in and do a simple operation anymore. And the thing needs to be eradicated. So that's sort of just, again, a surface level introductory definition of what late stage capitalism is. Wikipedia said, and again, this is very surface level, you can do a whole lot more deep in-depth analysis, but they said the phrase late stage capitalism is used commonly as a critique of the allegedly fascistic qualities that emerge in the later stages of capitalism. Capitalism to many may seem to be free of this exploitation if not taken to the extremes of late capitalism. So basically saying that, like, maybe capitalism could be a fine economic system if it's not taken to certain fascistic extremes, but it has been, and we are currently living in a state where it has been taken to those fascistic extremes. So we are currently living in a stage of unsustainability. And so what the far left is saying is that we need to eradicate this economic system and replace it with something more sustainable. Replace it with something that actually has a shot at having a future. Replace it with something that provides people with the opportunity to have easy access to basic necessities like healthcare, education, food, and housing. And that on the surface all seems pretty simple and pretty logical and pretty kind, pretty humanistic. This is seen as an extreme view by many people because essentially completely rebuilding our economic system from the ground up with something new and hoping that that new thing not only works, but works better than capitalism ever did or could is no small task. So you're not proposing here a cosmetic change to capitalism. You're not proposing a higher tax on the top earners. You're not proposing a higher minimum wage. You're not proposing something that will act as a band-aid you're saying this thing cannot be fixed with small cosmetic changes. The entire economic system needs to be rethought from the ground up. How we think about money, our relationship to money, what money is in society needs to be systematically rebuilt. And that's extreme because there's no way to do that without significant discomfort and pain. And this is something that's going to be a theme as we continue through this conversation in this episode, is that like the thing that sort of characterizes extremist views is views on policies that would require society to go through a period of significant pain and discomfort and change. That does not always mean it's a bad thing. I mean, in your personal life, usually the things that affect you the most and that lead to the most personal growth come with their own fair share of pain and discomfort. That's just usually how positive growth is achieved in people's personal lives, is through a willingness to embrace and go through discomfort and pain. But yeah, that's what makes this an extremist view, is that it's scary. It's scary thinking about how we could possibly continue to move forward if overnight we dismantled the global economic system and tried to systematically build it up one brick at a time. It doesn't mean that it's not a lofty and noble ideal to shoot for. It just means that a lot of people are going to it's going to be very hard to convince people. It's going to be very hard to get converts and to convince people to believe the way that you believe, because most people would say, surely there's something more cosmetic or simple or easy that we could achieve legislatively right now that could help us get there, or help us get to something that's more sustainable, that could maybe undo the damage that's been done. And yeah, I don't really know. Whenever I talk about this, whenever I talk about dismantling late stage capitalism, there's always someone in the comments of the chat. There might have been, right now I haven't really been looking, who's always like, well, what would you propose replacing it with? And I don't know. That's the answer to that question, is like, that's the thing that scares me about this, is I'm like, I don't know. I don't have an easy, ready to go system to replace late stage capitalism with. That's the other thing that's really scary for a lot of people, is like being able to see the problem, being able to see the unsustainability of it, being able to see that like the tumor has progressed to a point where surgery is no longer an option, but not knowing how to fix it outside of that. Basically, like all the smartest minds in the game are looking at it and going, I don't know what to do. And I'm not saying I'm one of the smartest minds in the game, but I'm saying there's a lot of different theories on how we could do this. And I'm like, I wouldn't start with me. I wouldn't ask me, but I'm just sitting here as a citizen, as a person alive in this situation going, well, this obviously doesn't work. And this is obviously unsustainable. And something should probably be done about this if we want to have a future as a species. I don't know what. I don't know where it starts, and I don't know what it looks like. But that's a conversation that the far left would like there to be more mainstream representation for. More mainstream representation for that idea, more mainstream representation for that possibility, more mainstream representation for that conversation. Another thing that the far left would like to, the far left extreme left would like to eradicate is the eradication of police, of the police force and policing. You see how late stage capitalism comes first because it bleeds into everything. The way our society is structured has a lot to do with like why policing in its current form doesn't work. It's an overfunded institution with an underpaid workforce. They're massively overfunded and over-militarized and over-endowed with societal power, but their workforce is underpaid. So you have all these people, you know, I'm not going to go too far into psychoanalyzing the kind of person that wants to be a cop, but in general, the kind of person who wants to have that kind of societal power over their fellows is questionable, sus, I would say, even. I would say, kind of like the kind of person who wants to be president. You know, like you hear this a lot. People are like, I don't trust the kind of person who's like, you know who should be in charge of everything? Me. Like the kind of person who wants to be in charge of a church, the kind of person who wants to be, the representative for thousands or millions of people, the kind of person who wants to be that voice. I'm always suspicious of those people. And I'm definitely suspicious of the kind of person who's like, you know what job I want? The job where you can kill people and no one can put you in jail for it. I want that job. I want the job where I can kill people at work. if they really bother me, I want to be able to kill them and like no one can say anything about it. And you can have me on camera. You can have me on camera killing a person who is begging for their life, and I probably won't go to jail for that. Like that's the job I want, you know? And so like, again, I'm not going to say that that's every person who gets into law enforcement. I'm just going to say that like, there's enough people and there's enough evidence to suggest that there's enough people who want that job that I'm like, sus. But the problem capitalistically is that like you're attracting those kind of workers. That's your workforce. Your workforce is built with people who are comfortable with the ins and outs of a job where they're like regularly dehumanizing people and their fellows on the street. And they're massively overpowered. Society gives them way too much leeway and way too much power. And they're massively overfunded. They have way too much equipment and they're way too militarized and way too high powered that way, but they're still underpaid. The average police salary in America is between $55,000 and $80,000 a year. So you have all these like kind of scary aggro people who are like maybe looking for a job where they can legally brutalize people or kill people. And then you're also like not giving them a lot of money. In a society where the cost of housing, the cost of healthcare, the cost of food is continually skyrocketing, the cost of gas is continually going up. So you're putting those people in that same pressure cooker, that same economic pressure cooker that we're all put in, and you're also endowing them with this amazing, insane amount of power. And it just results in something that doesn't work, that is foundationally, fundamentally broken, that from its inception wasn't really a good idea. So the far left extremes doesn't say, let's defund police and take it from there. The far left says, let's get rid of it. It doesn't work. The house needs to go. It's dilapidated. It is infested from the ground up with termites, and it needs to go. The reason why this is viewed as extreme and scary is because many people in society feel on an emotional level like the police are the only thing standing between us and a chaotic, anarchic world where criminals run wild in the streets doing whatever they want. It's sort of an emotional feeling of like, what are we going to do? Again, it's sort of similar to the capitalism thing where it's like, well, what are you going to replace it with? Now, there are some really, really good ideas that have been proposed of like you break it down and you replace it with a multifaceted community investment. So that's another big problem with the police force as it is just they do way too many jobs. Again, this underpaid force that's asked to do all of these different things that are all different, that all require like a different touch and a different discipline and a different like expertise. We're trying to have cops who their training is already insufficient and not good for the job that they're doing, but we're trying to have them like have the ability to assess all these really, really different kinds of situations and assess them in different ways with different levels of severity and basically be experts in way too many fields. Instead of being like, we're going to have a very highly specialized task force that deals with this kind of problem that's going to be different from the highly specialized task force that deals with this kind of problem. That's going to be very like, there's no reason why the person that's pulling you over for speeding needs to be also threatening your life with a gun. Needs to be like, I'm gonna pull you over for speeding, but if I get some back talk with you, you're gonna see my hand touch the hilt of my gun and you're gonna get really, really, really scared really quick. And then both of us are gonna be scared and the energy is gonna be heightened and who knows what happens from there. It's like, I don't need that. We have parking enforcers who go and people think like, well, it's a really scary thing pulling people over. People make this argument that like cops get shot at in routine traffic stops all the time. But also the person that's shooting at them knows that they have a gun. So if I'm a dangerous criminal that is afraid of going to jail and the police pull me over for speeding, and I know that I'm dealing with a police officer who is not armed, who's just a traffic officer who just pulls people over for speeding tickets, I'm most likely not going to engage that person with like a firefight. But if I am in the current system that I'm in, where the cop is everything, where that cop that's pulling me over for a traffic infraction is also going to run my plates to look if I was involved in any, if I have a record or anything like that. And I know that I've got something in the car. He's going to see my record and he's going to get me out of the car and take me to jail. And so now I'm like, my only way out of this is to start shooting because if I don't act first, I'm going to maybe get killed. We've got this heightened situation, but like we have parking enforcers who go around giving tickets to people and they don't have a gun on their hip. And people don't really like, they're not like getting in firefights with the parking enforcer because that parking enforcer isn't also a person who's endowed with the power to execute them in public if they get a vibe that things are going south, so the proposal from the extreme left is eradicate the current police force, literally demolish it, get rid of it, and replace it with multiple institutions with people trained in different specialties for different situations. So it's a different kind of community investment. Also, just this idea that people are afraid that like you get rid of the police and tomorrow the streets it's the purge and the criminals are running the streets. It's based on just sort of like not correct data. It's not supported by any empirical data. There have been it's just been study after study after study after study. Again, this is a very generalized surface level analysis that we're doing on this podcast, but do yourself a favor during this show or after the show and go and Google, do the police actually prevent crime? And just read the first 20 studies that come up that have been done by multiple different institutions over the last 50 years, analyzing the crime rate in different areas over time, juxtaposed to the amount of policing or the funding of policing in those areas. And the data comes back time and time again that police in most areas are not responsible for lowering crime. They have no effect on the crime rate whatsoever. And in fact, most police officers spend most of their time doing things that are not crime related. We're inundated in our society with propaganda that's pro cop. We have all these television cop procedurals and detective procedurals like Law and Order and all these different cop shows that make it look like cops 80 to 90% of the time are dealing with violent criminals in their day-to-day job, and 80 to 90% of the time are getting their man, are getting the right person who committed the crime and bringing them to justice. And that's just not true at all. In fact, the vast majority of violent crime cases that are investigated by investigative branches of the police force go unsolved or are solved incorrectly, are like they get the wrong person. It happens all the time. And all these studies that you can read on the ineffectiveness of police forces when it comes to combating crime show time and time again that most of the time police officers spend in their day-to-day job is not spent on what's called crime response situations. They spend most of their time on things called proactive policing, which is situations that they create. And most of the time it's stuff like traffic stops, like just looking for people to stop. And these analyses will, of course, tell you that in most areas, in most urban areas, people of color are twice as likely to be stopped in traffic than white people are. There's all kinds of just, of course, racial prejudice and stuff in these systems. But yeah, one study that I looked at that the ACLU of Southern California did with a group called Catalyst California showed that by analyzing police behavior, budget use, demographic breakdowns of police incidents, showed that Black people in California were 2 times as likely to be pulled over as white people. It also showed, and this is a quote from the study, that overall, sheriff patrol officers spend significantly more time on officer-initiated stops or proactive policing than in law enforcement parlance. Oh, that's what it says in the thing. Proactive policing in law enforcement parlance. Than they do responding to community members' calls for help. So way more of the time on a day-to-day in a cop's life, they're spending their time on stuff that they were like, I got a hunch about that car over there. I want to talk to that person. I don't know that person on the sidewalk. I don't like the way that they look. Way more of their time is spent just sort of harassing and bullying and bothering day-to-day people than it is actually responding to calls from people saying, hey, I need your help over here. But that, and that shows just a problem with, again, what happens when you endow a certain arm of the government with the ability to go around and terrorize and brutalize people in society. And B, it also shows that like day to day, there's just not that much actual crime going on. There just aren't that many calls coming in that are pulling them there. We don't need as big of a crime response force as we have in most places. It could be a much smaller group of people who are responding to the actual calls of actual crimes that are happening. So we've got this crime response force going around in America, and they're responding. About 10% of their job is actually responding to real crime. And 90% of their job is just going around accusing people of being criminals. 90% of their job is just going around just looking at people who look like they might be criminals and just bothering them and ruining their day or ruining their life by beating them within an inch of their life or killing them, So again, yeah, do yourself a favor, go and Google, do police actually stop crime? The ideas that a lot of people have about like the police being this like last line of defense between us and a chaotic crime-ridden world, it's just not really supported by data. It's just time and time again, when they do these studies, you see that like we have a way overinflated sense of the effectiveness of police when it comes to decreasing or handling crime in society. In fact, a lot of these studies shows that they might actually make it worse. So this is one of those things that the far left believes, the eradication of police. It's really scary for people because they don't know they don't know if what we're going to replace it with is going to work at least as well as the current system. And also because they're afraid that the police work better than they do. They don't. So don't worry about that. Okay, moving on. The eradication, this is something, the next thing that I think that the far left extreme believes in, the eradication of systemic bigotry. So again, the first two really help with this one. If you can eradicate late stage capitalism and replace it with an economic system that is more humanistic and more sustainable, an economic system that prioritizes the well-being of people an economic system that wants to make sure that people have access to basic needs, regardless of their sexual identity, their gender identity, their sexual preference, their race, that we're just taking care of people, that can really inform the eradication of systemic bigotry. And if you get rid of a terroristic police force that is consistently shown to disproportionately brutalize certain communities over other communities, you can do a lot to change the societal psyche when it comes to prejudice and bigotry. This thing is a little more amorphous than the first two systems. The first two systems are a little bit more concrete as far as being systems and institutions in society. This thing is a little bit more of like a virus, dare I say. The right loves to talk about the woke mind virus, but if anything really does fit the definition of sort of a contagion and an infection in the brain, in the human psyche, it's bigotry and prejudice, because it's such a nonsensical concept. It's like such a head-scratchingly strange concept that we have such a problem as a species with like othering, demoralizing, demonizing, dehumanizing, marginalizing people because they're different in some way. It's so bonkers because everyone is different. Everyone's different, but people find this way of grouping themselves together to be like, no, but this group that I can put myself in, this in-group identity that I can identify with is a good one. And it's a good one to be in. We deserve better things than people who don't fit the criteria to be in this in-group. It's so crazy. And so like, this is one where I'm like, it shouldn't be hard to get converts for this. It shouldn't be hard to convince people how antithetical to societal success, to how antithetical to the success of the human species systemic bigotry is. It's also another thing that's really hard when it comes to eradicating systemic bigotry is convincing people that it exists. That's the current place that we're at, is like, when you try to talk to people on the right about the eradication of systemic bigotry or institutional bigotry, they will often be like, I know that we used to have a problem with systemic bigotry. I know that we used to have a problem with institutional bigotry, but we don't anymore. They'll often use arguments like, tell me one law that says that a white person is able to do something that a black person isn't. Like, what is one right that a straight person has that a gay person doesn't have? They'll bring stuff up like this, and it's like, yeah, we have done a better job in the current system of trying to write laws so that cosmetically the law looks like it reflects this idea that systemic bigotry is a problem, but we still are living with the repercussions of the times when the law very much so was written to favor certain people over others, and B, we still have to deal with the fact that like people are still practicing in their day-to-day lives and still like operating their businesses and you know, reporting the news to each other and doing things on a day-to-day level, on a human-to-human level, that are still massively informed by personal prejudice and bigotry. And that's something that like you can't really see by just looking at the letter of the law, by looking at the wording of certain laws. So that's sort of a problem, is like convincing people that it exists. The other problem that we bump into when trying to approach this one, the reason why this one can feel extreme and scary is because it could start to feel like a form of thought policing or trying to enforce a certain set of beliefs. One of the main places that prejudice and bigotry comes from in our current society is from people's religious practices and their religious beliefs. If you start telling people like, we all need to operate in society as though that prejudicial or bigoted religious belief of yours is not correct, if you start saying like you're not allowed to have that prejudicial belief or that bigoted belief, we get ourselves as leftists into this is that thing I was talking about at the beginning. This is where it's coming back. The idea of trying to convince people to be on your team with this stuff, but also leaving room for ideological pluralism. And this is the struggle with ideological pluralism is like, do you try to be so open-minded about ideological diversity and pluralism that you make space for white nationalism, white supremacy, for like just like all that, like flat out racism, for misogyny, for homophobia, for transphobia? Personally, my personal stance is no. My personal stance is ideological pluralism and ideological diversity can exist just fine in a world where everyone is respecting each other and treating each other with kindness. You can still have differing approaches to having a relationship with something you call God, or something you call a higher power, or something you call spirit. You can have different approaches for the more ephemeral, ineffable aspects of existence. You can have different approaches philosophically to just like the questions of where do we come from and all this stuff. But we're going to have to try somehow to get on the same page that like we need to respect each other for our differences and honor our differences. And I know a lot of people who have prejudicial beliefs that are religious don't think that they're guilty of creating systemic bigotry, because they'll be like, yeah, I have that belief. Like I hear this all the time where people are like, I'm totally okay with someone being gay. I'm totally okay with it. I just don't want it in front of kids. So they're still sort of in this state where they're convincing themselves like I'm okay with the ideological pluralism of gay people existing. That's fine. I just don't want it. So they're in their mind, they're fighting for a society where they're honoring the difference, but their personal religious belief is saying, I'm nervous about that being pushed on kids. I think that that's nonsense and bullshit, obviously. I think that they're wrong about that. And I think that it's also massively hypocritical for people who their entire ideology is founded upon the indoctrination of kids, like the hard line indoctrination of kids through terror and fear, through threat of eternal torture. They're teaching these kids from a very young age, you need to believe the way that we believe. I think that the level to which they instill ideology and indoctrinate children is just, there is no comparison. There is no good faith comparison to the level to which leftists indoctrinate children. So I think that they're not, I don't think that their ideas are supported by actual reality. But the thing that makes this difficult is A, convincing these people that they are bigots and that their bigotry is real and that it exists. And B, how do you go about like excising that stuff from a certain religious practice while still allowing a person to have that religious practice? How do you go like, I want you to be able to stay a Christian. I want you to be able to like believe that Jesus Christ died for your sins and that he's like the king of the earth. And I want you to be able to have that practice if that works for you. But I'm going to need you to stop thinking that this one verse in Leviticus is like what the entire religion is about. I'm going to need you to actually just sort of let go of that. Like you need to let go of that. It's silly that you haven't already. I said this on a podcast, I think a week ago or 2 weeks ago, that like the way that modern Christians practice their faith, you would think that the Bible is God every few chapters reminding people that he doesn't like gay and trans people. You would think that like every few verses, God would be like, so anyway, you got to make sure that you grow your corn on the third Sunday of the second month of the year. And also, you guys, I can't stress this enough. I really don't want anyone being gay. I'm going to say it again. I know I sound like a broken record here, but like really don't be gay and don't let people be gay. And then God would be like, all right, so anyway, so check this out. So Moses, he had to get these people out of this thing. He was talking, I talked to him as a burning bush. It was really cool. We split the sea. Also, like, I'm gotta be clear about this. I don't like gay people. Like, I really, really want to affirm this here. And then Jesus comes down in the New Testament and he's like, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. We need to take care of the poor and heal people of their leprosy. And also, don't be trans, please. Please. I'm serious about this one. I'm really serious. Like, you got to stop being trans. Okay. Like, I'm going to heal your leprosy, but please don't be trans. I'm all about treating people the right way, okay? But like, don't be gay or trans. I'm serious, all right? I'm going to go and die on the cross for everyone's sins. And also, like, Jesus on the cross was like, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Also, oh man, I really hope that no gay or trans people are here because I don't like them. And that's the end of, those are my last words. You would think that that is what the Bible would read like based on the way that modern Christians practice Christianity. And I don't think that it's that hard to just say like, hey, you guys, hang on to all the Jesus stuff. Hang on to all the stuff that he said and all the stuff that he preached. I think it should be the most important stuff anyway, because your church is Christianity and he's supposed to be the main thing. Keep all that stuff. And can we convince you to just let go of that one verse in Leviticus that you're probably misinterpreting anyway? Can we just convince you to let go of that one thing, please? And you can keep everything else. And you just got to get rid of like, and also like, the book says nothing about being trans. I really liked this new thing that I keep seeing Christians on TikTok do. Christian apologists will be like, oh, the Bible doesn't say anything about being trans, does it? Well, it says right here that in the beginning, God made male and female. Boom. And I'm like, okay, cool. All right. If that's it, if that's all you can find in the Bible to say that God doesn't want people being trans, that's not enough. That's not strong enough. God was like, Jesus was really, really, really clear and like really adamant about you guys not being dicks and about like everyone being nice to each other and about like accepting people as they are and being kind and leading with love. He didn't say shit about like being a dick to trans people. I would need a verse where he says that in order to understand how much you make your religion about this. I would need at least one verse where Jesus is like, anyway, if he let he who is without sin cast the first stone, also don't change your gender. I'm see that for real, okay? Let he is who is without sin cast the first stone. That's important. Also, whatever gender the doctor said when you were born, that's it, okay? And there's two of them. All right. I don't want any other chromosomal breakdowns. And I don't want none of these intersex people coming in here saying, oh, what about me? No. All right. 2. 1, 2. Okay. I would need that in order to be like, all right, fair enough. You got a book that like really clearly says it. But you don't have a book that justifies in any way, shape, or form the level to which you keep doubling down on this bigotry, on the bigotry toward these communities. You do have a book that justifies slavery and all kinds of terrible things like genocide and spousal abuse and incest and a bunch of things like that. And weirdly enough, you've been able to evolve the religion to the point where, oh yeah, someone reported my live on TikTok, so I just got booted on TikTok. I'm gonna deal with that later, but anyway, we'll just continue the video here. But this is the biggest hurdle that I think is standing in the way of the eradication of systemic bigotry. But like I said earlier, the eradication of late-stage capitalism and the eradication of the police force would go a long ways in helping the eradication of systemic bigotry. There's one more that I want to talk about. This is the eradication of any man-made infrastructure that unsustainably harms the planet and takes more than it replaces. I want to go back just a second. Isn't it funny that that a bunch of Christians came into my live and reported it and I got booted on TikTok? Like, isn't that funny? Because it's like, what am I saying in there legitimately that's not correct? Like, just talking about like, hey guys, can you be nicer? Can you be nicer since your book doesn't explicitly say that you need to be this mean to gay and trans people? Could you conceive of a future where you might be nicer? And they're like, and their response is, fuck this guy. Let's mass report this live and get his account suspended for a few days. Also, fuck TikTok for how easy it is to do that. It just drives me nuts. But this is the situation that we're in currently, and these are the rules. But let's move on. Eradication of any man-made infrastructure that unsustainably harms the planet and takes more than it replaces. So once again, eradicating late-stage capitalism helps a lot with this one. Late-stage capitalism informs the use of unsustainable building practices, unsustainable transportation, and all kinds of unsustainable entire industries that are killing the planet. Overfishing, all this stuff that we're just destroying the ocean with. One of the reasons, this is so hard to confront is because late stage capitalism demands that we continue to farm and fish and build at an unsustainable rate to continue driving profits for the corporations that are doing these things. If we had a different economic system, maybe we could have a system for food and transportation and construction that doesn't need to be constantly outdoing itself and constantly producing more and more. But we do have the economic system that we have that demands that companies that fish in the ocean are constantly bringing more to the table, that they're constantly getting more. So we know that we're dragging massive nets on the bottom of the ocean and that we're destroying coral reefs and that we're wiping out entire species of fish, but we can't stop because profits. We don't actually need all that food. In fact, we waste the vast majority of what we pull out of the ocean. It just goes wasted. No one eats it. So it's not like we need to fish at this rate because the population has gotten so big that it's the only way to feed us. No, the vast majority of food that we produce does not get eaten, not just from the ocean, but just food general. So, but this is the case because of capitalism. It's like these farmers in Arizona that will farm massive amounts of alfalfa because they get a bigger water allowance for their farm if they're farming certain plants, and like alfalfa is one of those plants. So they will farm all this alfalfa and make all this alfalfa that they don't actually intend on selling or using, just so that they can have a higher water allowance, because they need that water allowance to keep their farm going in these harsh conditions and to sell the things that are their higher yield, higher, value, higher value crops, And so capitalism is forcing them to be unsustainable with their business practices. Obviously, none of this works for the species or the planet. Like, it's not going to work. So we need to completely get rid of any man-made infrastructure or building practices that unsustainably harm the planet and take more than they replace. One of the reasons this is considered extreme is because many of us cannot conceive of a system where we can adequately meet the needs of over 8 billion people and growing without some level of unsustainable farming or building. It also threatens to dismantle industries that provide a living to hundreds of millions of people. So again, capitalism. There are people's livelihoods and jobs at stake when we talk about threatening these industries. And also just like the lack of mainstream representation for far left ideas means that there is a massive amount of people who are uneducated when it comes to how a more sustainable system could work. In their brains, it's like, I understand that our current practices and current system is unsustainable. I don't understand how we could possibly have a system that isn't. And if we had more mainstream representation for these ideas, maybe more people would get that. Somebody said, welcome TikTokers. Hopefully some more TikTokers show up from the TikTok live getting banned, but whatever. So yeah, that's essentially it. Those are like the 4 that I broke down. There's probably more that I didn't think of, but essentially, I mean, again, anything that's going to cause a significant amount of pain and discomfort and need a significant amount of work when it in change, massive on the massive like special level of change is going to be seen as extreme and radical. And it is extreme and radical, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And I think overall, the extreme left has ideas that are necessary and good overall for the species, for the planet, for everyone. That like this is what needs to happen if we want to keep going, if we want to keep doing this experiment. But they're very hard to achieve because A, there's not enough mainstream representation for them, and B, we don't have enough people who believe in them right now. And every single one of them would require a counter plan of systems and institutions that could be implemented in a timely, smooth way that could minimize pain and discomfort and could be ready to go. I mean, it would require just like a lot of boldness and bravery on behalf of the species, psychologically. But it's not to say that these ideas are unachievable, because what the extreme right shows us is that it is possible for extremist views to get mainstream influence and weight behind them. In fact, I'd argue that it's easier for extreme right views to get mainstream weight behind them because they tend to be more fascistic. And fascism has a historical precedent. A lot of the things that the extreme left does do not have much historical precedent of like working in modern civilization. So it's harder for people to conceive of. But people, even if they think that, Nazi Germany was overall bad, there's a lot of people that like buy into far right ideology that will still talk about how Nazism in Germany like did wonders for that country's economy, and that it really did a lot for giving Germany a comeback after World War I as a country, that their national pride went up and that things in the country started looking more colorful and bright, and that people had hope so long as they weren't in one of the groups that Nazism was trying to eradicate. Again, far right extremism trying to eradicate people, not systems. Yeah, I don't know. Princess Luna says on YouTube, someone might have only heard you say, "Don't be gay, I mean it," and missed the lead up. LOL. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe it was the leftists that banned my live because of the name of it too. The name of it, looking at the name of the conversation, A Crash Course in Far Left Extremism, you could think easily that I'm talking about why far left extremism is bad, but I'm not. I'm just kind of talking about like what far left extremism looks like and is. And hopefully this conversation has shown you that like there really is no mainstream representation for any of these ideas. And also these ideas are not that scary when you actually break them down and get into them. Yeah, I would continue the conversation in the comments section, but we lost like all of our commenters on TikTok, and I need to get over here and appeal this live ban. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there. That's basically the conversation I wanted to have, and we did it. So thank you, and thanks for hanging out on YouTube in the comments section. Thanks to everyone who was here on TikTok before the TikTok live got banned. Back next week with more. People Pleaser is written, edited, hosted, and produced by me, Austin Archer, with original theme music also by me. You can find more of that music by going to austinarchermusic.bandcamp.com or by looking up Austin Archer on Spotify or Apple Music. Patreon.com/Austin Archer. I've gotten a handful of new Patreon patrons in the last few weeks, and it really did my heart some good to see. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to the newbies, and thank you to the people who have been there the whole time, to the day ones. Really, really can't say enough how much I appreciate the support from the Patreon patrons. If you would like to support this show or the content that I make online, check it out, patreon.com/Austin Archer. We would love to have you there. Mercury on YouTube says, I learned stuff. Thanks. I'm so glad. If one person found this informative and good, that means a lot. So thank you. Yeah. All right. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. See you next week. Love you so much. Bye-bye.